Hello, welcome to another Sonic State special. You may remember we did a Bass Station 2 video with Nick Bookman from Novation, and it was such a popular thing that we decided we want to do something more, and it just so happens that it's 21 years of Novation is actually this year. So how does it feel to be 21?
It's very good again. I like it.
It's nice to be back. Yeah. So what we thought we'd do is we basically got a collection of a whole bunch of Novation kit from the Novation archives, as well as Nick himself. And we're going to kind of go through some of the models and sort of figure out where it's been and where it's going and where it's going to end up. But first of all, we started off with this is basically where everything started, isn't it? This is the original Bass Station, right?
Yes, that's right. This was wasn't the first product that the company did, but it's certainly the first synthesizer.
MMT10.
MM10,
which was very similar to this, but just had a slot in it and you could put a
QY10.
Yeah, I had one, actually. What was it about the Bass Station that really kind of hit home? Because this was a big hit for Novation, wasn't it?
Sure, well, 93. People were seeking TB303s, SH101s, that type of thing. The cost of getting one of those in the first place was still quite expensive. Prices were on the rise. And then to get it retrofitted with a MIDI kit was additional expense. So the idea behind the Bass Station was to have something of that sound type, a monophonic bass synthesizer, with MIDI control.
This was what, 93, wasn't
93,
it? So it was a bit beyond that, but everybody wanted that kind of big bass sound because there was lots of remixes, lots of kind of musical remixes coming on where they needed analog type sounds, but it was, like you say, hard to get. Incidentally, nice to see analog spelt correctly there. So tell us, what's so special about the the Bass Station?
The Bass Station. Well, the Bass Station was a 2 oscillator subtractive synth with 12 and 24 decibel filter, and several of the controls transmitted MIDI data, which was pretty novel.
So you could automate. That was the big thing. I'd forgotten about that, wasn't it? It was automatable, which was the really big deal, wasn't it?
Exactly. So you could record your knob tweaks into your Atari ST and get this to replay.
Oh, let's have a listen then. We got it set up, haven't we? So
we have.
Well, that's actually quite a beefy sound. That's more your sort of SH kind of sound, isn't it?
Yeah, because we've got the 2 oscillators going on this one. If we bring it down to just one, oscillator 1.
Josh Wink.
Exactly that type of sound.
And we had memories as well in this, didn't we? So
yeah, a whopping 7 memories.
7, that's not very binary or digital, is it?
The 8th one was your manual setting.
This was the first thing. Then we were on to, what was the next thing? Was the Bass Station rack.
Yeah, Bass Station rack was the next thing that came along, which was 94, I think.
Which we actually have over here in the corner, don't we?
Yep, we've got one of those.
It was actually, there was a difference, wasn't it? It wasn't just a kind of rack version, there was more to it, right?
Absolutely, no. It had several improvements. For a start, you've got a display, because you've got more memory locations. This came with 40 presets and 60 user locations, so that obviously helps make it easier to navigate. The LFOs could sync to MIDI clock. More of the controls transmitted MIDI data, and the envelopes had a little switch, so you could control envelopes 1, envelopes 2, or envelopes 1 and 2, which is something that we actually have come to revisit with the Bass Station 2. Around the back there's CV and gate in and CV and gate out, so you can connect this up and control one of the mono synths that were around at the time, or indeed still on the second-hand market today. There's an external input to the filter, so you could feed drum loops or something like that through this, and single line output, and it also added MIDI through, so it'd sit quite comfortably in your rack.
And that really kind of followed the production techniques, because everybody was running things through filters.
That's right.
But again, to get something that had an external input, there wasn't an awful lot about. So you were kind of, how did you do it? Were you listening to what people wanted, or was it just you had the zeitgeist?
No, it's always been the idea really with the company to garner customers' feedback, also to keep an ear out for what's happening in music at the time, and use some intuition with it. But when we get customer feedback asking for a particular feature, then we tend to listen.
So CV gate, was that, what format was that? Was it switchable, or was it just...
yeah, it was switchable. You could switch it between hertz per octave and volts per octave. You could control where the sort of bass octave was.
And also, speaking of staying in the rack kind of scenario, also got there was a super bass station, right?
Super bass station rack, yeah, that's right.
But also, interestingly, the drum station, which I don't think many people knew about.
The drum station came into being in 1995, really readily available in 96.
So we've got the drum station out of the rack, and this is it here. This isn't actually the first version, though, is it?
No, this is the last one, the third version. This is the when the drum station became the D station, which tied in with some products we haven't talked about yet, but the A station and K station.
So we've got a COD 808 pattern here. And what could we do with the D station then?
Well, the idea behind it was to recreate in synthesis what the 808 and 909 drum machines could do.
Once again, very sought after machines you just couldn't get anywhere,
yeah.
So this just filled the need, right?
And what people were doing at the time, they were using samples, but samples didn't really give you the way to get in there and edit the sounds in the same way that you could on those machines. This was the first machine that we used a DSP inside of. So this is the ASM bit is analog sound modelling, and the kicks, the snares, the toms, they're all synthesised. Some of the other sounds on there are effectively samples stored away in an EEPROM, but with the kick, for example, you can get in there, tune it.
Where's my hip hop ring when I need it?
So it's very much similar things you can do on the 808, but we also added a few things. For example, you could distort this.
Yeah. I remember putting 808 samples through both guitar amps and stuff to get the same thing, but this is much more straightforward. And you could do stuff with the actual samples and change the start point.
It's not just the samples, but also with the kick, for example. Try and get this going here. This is the front cut parameter on the 808.
It just softens it slightly.
Yeah, works really well on the snares as well.
Oh, okay. And we've also got a 909 pattern.
Yep, let's get that.
So again, I apologise for the COD pattern, but I mean the 909 was really, really important in the sound, and we got manipulation of the bass drum specifically that gave us an awful lot of.
Yep.
Yeah. So what could we do similar sort of things?
Yes, similar things with this. Bring that.
So
you
that's
can really hear
the tone and the pitch.
The clickiness. If we bring in the distortion again.
Instant gabber.
Brilliant for it.
So not only did it have this, it also had multiple outputs and other aspects to it, and you could MIDI kind of control a lot of these sounds as well. So you could get some pretty sort of weird automation effects going on, right?
Well, the great thing about it was that you could use both the 808 and the 909 kits at the same time.
Sort of separate octaves, kind of,
yeah. Yeah, you could transpose where they were. So it was easy if you got something on one kit, you could put it on the other kit. It also gave you an area where you could play one drum sound, primarily the kicks, chromatically.
Oh, so you could like have pitch bass lines.
Yeah, and as you say, individual outputs, which weren't per drum, but there were six assignable outputs that you could put a group of sounds to.
So you say this was the first sort of moves into DSP, but then your next synth, which was the Nova, that was fully in it, right?
That's right, yeah. Well, in fact, there's the Supernova and the Nova 98 and 99 respectively. That really was taking the analog sound modelling to the next level.
We've got the Nova here.
Yeah.
And this represents actually quite a big change, doesn't it? Because what we're talking about here is something that's DSP powered rather than pure analog electronics.
Absolutely. The shift to DSP meant that we could do more. More oscillators, more parts, more of everything. We weren't limited by the number of components that made up a circuit anymore. It's just down to the sheer grunt of the...
So this was famous for, well, let's have a listen to a couple of sounds, right?
Sure.
303 once again.
Yeah.
But we can hear lots of effects in there, so you kind of went to town. Because, I mean, the thing about this, I remember, it had tons of polyphony, tons of parts, so people could actually put together entire kind of arrangements. Perhaps didn't have drums, did it?
This didn't have like a drum kit, but it did have individual drum sounds that you could layer in the multi-timbral mode and have a kick on one part, hat on another, snare on another.
And big sort of lush pads and that sort of thing.
Brilliant for those, yeah. beautiful.
I mean, because this was
synthesis,
going
yeah.
up against things like the JV1080 and that sort of stuff, which had more, it had samples. This was all modelled, right?
That's right. I mean, there were other virtual analogues around similar sort of time. The first incarnation, I think, of the Access virus was out. The JP8000, Korg MS2000, the Nords, the Nord lead.
How many parts? We had...
Well, the Nova was 6-part multitimbral. And a key thing about this that continued through the Supernova series and indeed into the KS was that we had separate effects for each part.
That's right, and it was a really big selling point, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember the ad campaign, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And multi-timbral, what, polyphony around about 16?
When this came out, it had 12-voice polyphony.
Right.
One of the benefits with it being DSP based and having flash memory on there is that we could release operating system updates. The last OS that we released for this increased the polyphony from 12 to 16 voices.
We got any more sounds we can play?
Yes.
Because there was quite good sequence and LFO'd and all sorts of very complex.
Yeah, I mean, there's a...
Pitsy House.
Exactly.
Was that doing it all in LFO?
No, it's arpeggiators. We've got 3 parts running. Each part's got its own arpeggiator.
I remember this feature, the solo feature, really, because it's like it's very easy to get lost.
Not only solo, but music as well. So. Go back into solo.
So it seemed, I mean, even though this has got a lot of depth and layers to it, you know, it's still very much geared around the idea of real-time performance and real-time modification.
Absolutely.
Presumably all of this stuff could be recorded in the sequences at the time as well.
Yeah, again, every control transmits MIDI data, whether it's a button or a knob or an encoder.
Got any famous users?
Well, certainly that first 303 patch I played you, there's a story from the sound designer, the principal sound designer and guy that worked for us, Phil McDonald. He took this up to Real World Studios and I showed it in front of Sasha and BT, and they went nuts over that 303 patch.
And you were playing it there via the K station, which
Yeah.
we should also take a look at as well. So this is the K. It's kind of very much like a pocket polysynth almost, isn't it?
Perfect description. This was the keyboard version of the A station.
Which was the rack mount polysynth.
Yep, it was a 1U rack. And it was our attempt to bring the Nova technology down to the next price point.
And it's very much, I mean, because what's interesting about going to DSP, the hardware becomes less relevant. It's more about getting the design right. Yeah. So you've got a thing that people want. And I remember this was very desirable because it sort of fits into the idea of the bedroom studio, which everybody was kind of working in at the time. I don't remember seeing many of them live, but it was a...
No, it seemed to be more of a bedroom studio type product. Its form factor certainly helped with that. You know, it's not got a huge keyboard to trail around, and in many ways it's all back to the base station idea of a 2-octave keyboard.
And lots of patches. This is the other thing that we didn't mention with the Nova. You know, it was the advent of things with tons and tons of patches. I mean, you used to get them in the JVs and what have you, but not so many user banks. And these had what, sort of 400 or 500 patches, didn't they?
The K station has got a total of 400 patches. 200 are factory patches, and 200 are space for user patches. Yep.
So let's have a quick listen to the sound.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is just a nice, deep, rich string sound. And what I've done is I've just upped the release a little bit to show a trick that we can do with this. Can you hear that note stealing bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've gone up to another variant of this patch. It's not note stealing quite so much because the previous patch used unison mode, which is something that we worked on quite hard with the Nova series, and that's the idea of stacking up lots of the same voice on top of each other.
Right.
Now this unit is 8-voice poly, so that patch had 2 unison voices on it, so for every 4 notes I play, I'm playing 8,
Right.
which
So
is the reason why it's note stealing. So this is what that sounds like with unison off. It's a little bit thinner.
Yeah.
So one more variant on that. Just change the waveform slightly. And we've got something that we started on the Supernovas that we brought across here, which is double saw. On this you can do double sign, double try as well. And it's a way of effectively having 2 oscillators per oscillator
And then you can detune.
And detune the phase, move the phase around with an LFO. So that's it with the LFO, not moving the phase, it's static. That's it at maximum, it's a bit too much. Somewhere in the middle, it sounds nice and rich. And I'm still only using the basic amount.
So you can get a sort of fat, it's a fat button.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So as well as the K station, we had the KS4, which was a multi-timbral version, wasn't it? And we've got a couple of variants here, haven't we? We've got the rack version over there, but we also got the keyboard version. Let's have a quick listen to that, because that did some slightly different things as well, didn't it?
Yep.
So KS rack, this was different because it was basically a multi-timbral synthesizer, right?
Yeah, yeah. The KS came in KS4, 4-octave keyboard, KS5, 5-octave, and this rack variant. And it's got what we termed the advanced K station engine in it, so pretty similar to the K station, but with a few added tweaks.
You've got a one-note kind of demonstration we can hear. We can show one of those big,
big
features. So we've got like a drum pattern going on there, but it's a bit different to your average drum pattern, right? It's not.
Yeah. So what's actually triggering that drum pattern is an arpeggio. So it's not a sequencer.
So it was a MIDI pattern that was note trigger, and that was kind of something that was quite new, wasn't it? Because I don't recall that happening. It's like a Ranger keyboard technology almost, but it started to sort of filter into this, and it's actually quite cool.
Yeah, particularly really good if you start abusing it, and instead of using it on the drum patches, if you start using it on some of the bass patches and bring up portamento, you get some crazy slides happening. It's quite good, quite fun.
And it was easy to edit the 4 individual parts, which again was quite a big deal. And the other thing about this is obviously multi-timbrality, again, is focused more on synthesizer sounds. It's not like strings and pianos, it's synth stuff, isn't it? That's
absolutely. Yeah, there's no, well, actually there are samples in here, and the samples are primarily of the drum sounds, but they're treated as oscillator sources, so they're all looped round.
Again, this is all sort of DSP paste, but I mean the real granddaddy, or the king of the hill, is this chap over here, which I've been dying to have a look at this.
Me too, yeah.
So let's check it out.
Okay.
So Supernova 2, but this isn't just any Supernova 2, this is a very special one, right?
Absolutely.
Yep,
this is the platinum version, and it's a limited edition. There were very, very few made.
And this, I suppose this represents kind of the pinnacle of synth power. I mean, this is just absolutely stacked up with DSP, right?
Yeah. I mean, the 48 voice card had 60 SPs, there are 9 to start with, so you've got 15 DSPs in this thing.
And lots of polyphony. I mean, and the thing about this is that, there is, usually on synths like this, you've got kind of a couple of inches of nothing, but there's only this tiny bit of space where there isn't a knob or a button.
Absolutely.
So this represents would it be fair to say this is like the pinnacle of, discrete synthesis that Novation have ever built, or is that going a bit too far?
It's certainly the most complicated synth that we've ever built in terms of its control surface and how that fits together. And it's the most powerful in terms of the number of voices.
So as we've got on here, we've got to listen to a few more sounds, I think.
Sure, okay, I'll go through some of the individual sounds first. So it's just a nice sort of, nice little sound. Can't go anywhere near this without having an arpeggiator sound.
In many ways, it's a hybrid of studio and live, isn't it? So it's performance keyboard, but it's also the multi-timbrality. You can use it for... Yeah,
it was. It was very much actually designed with live in mind. It could be used as a master keyboard. It even had an external part that you could set up. You could even send raw MIDI data out of this thing to set up your entire kit. It's quite fantastic.
And it had aftertouch, of course, which
I'm
very pleased about.
Bass sounds. So even though it's a poly, it's still obviously really good for bass. But where this really came into its own was in layered sounds. So
very rich, isn't it?
It's also had FM on it. This wasn't just a subtractive synth. And the FM was obviously between the oscillators, but also the LFOs went way up into the audio spectrum.
Oh,
Went
so
as
you could
high
use
as 5
those as well.
kilohertz, yeah. It's just gorgeous. Lovely sound.
I want to cry. No, that's really, it does sound really nice. And I guess you sort of went crazy with the DSP effects as well. You could do all sorts of stuff with that extra power. You could get really creative with those things.
Absolutely. It also had a comb filter on here. It's tucked away under the special menu, but that was brilliant if you used it on the drums. So you can stick some other effects on them.
The other thing we haven't mentioned is, of course, this had a vocoder too, right? So I've got the mic here from the MiniNova, in fact. So do you want to do the honours?
Sure, this is the vocoder from the Supernova 2 keyboard. It's a 42-band vocoder and it's pretty powerful.
So it's kind of, was it amongst the first to have vocoders? I can't remember them being around much sort of until you brought them up again.
I can't remember which was the first to do it. It might well have been the Nova. I can't.
So who's the vocoder champion amongst Novation then? Somebody there was fighting for it.
At the time, I don't know who that was, but we've certainly got a vocoder champion now, who's Andy Leung. He's got to get a special mention.
Excellent. So this is the Supernova 2. I mean, around this time also, it was starting to move into you did the remote, didn't you? The remote, so it was starting to move towards these kind of controller side of things, which is a completely new thread to what Novation were doing. Yes?
That's right. I mean, you've got to remember what the musical landscape was like at the time. So the dance music and trance that this sort of keyboard was perfect for was on the wane a little bit.
Plugins coming in, yeah.
Yeah, people that were making that sort of music were using plugins, and also guitar music was really on the up as well.
That's true. Let's not forget the guitar.
Yeah. So with the plugin side of things, we saw that there was an opportunity there to make a really good controller.
And you did make some plugins as well, didn't you? Make software versions
yeah, we
of
did the V station, the B station, and they're still around today.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the controllers, I mean, you obviously with the remote SL, there was the thing with you had an extremely long LCD, I remember. So there was a lot of display coming back. And again, this is, and when did Automap come in at the same time, or did you?
This was with the remote SL. The first controller that we did, the remote, just had a similar sort of screen to the synthesizer or the K station, which was quite a small affair. It was the SL that brought in the long displays.
Okay, and let's not also forget the fact that you have the X synth, which was synth, audio, USB audio interface, and MIDI interface all wrapped together, right? Which
yeah,
was,
that's right.
Again, I think that was a first, wasn't it? For certainly one of the first I'd ever seen all together.
I think that was a first. Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, we've used that a couple of times on Sonic Touch. We've used it as an audio interface for the iPad because it's actually class compliant, even though it was what 2000 and I think it was 2004.
Yeah,
it's class compliant. You plug it into the iPad, you get audio interface, MIDI control, and the synthesizer all in the same unit.
Yeah.
So it's still current.
Well, in fact, we're still doing the same sort of idea today with the Ultranova. That's an audio interface. It's a USB interface and a MIDI controller as well.
Well, we shouldn't forget, actually, we've got a MiniNova over here, and that's got a couple of interesting, again, down to sort of interface, almost a bit more industrial design, how you kind of implement these kind of ideas for the changing music landscape.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that.
Okay.
So, MiniNova, very small, compact, quite a familiar form factor, but taken a lot of inspiration from some of the controller side of things as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Really, what we've got here is the essence of our synthesizer history boiled down into quite a small unit, with a lot of the knowledge that we've gained from the controller series thrown in to boot.
And as well as switching for arpeggiators and whatever, these pads have a unique function that works quite well. Show us. Let's see what it does.
It's the easiest way. What was actually happening there is they're being used as switches and they're bringing out different modulations or different ways of affecting the synth parameters.
So this is the animate feature, right?
That's right, that's what we call animate.
Is there an editor for this?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
There wasn't, so you can set all of that up.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Ultranova editor. It works as a plug-in. You can get in there. You can really see what's happening in the synthesizer if you want to. You can do it by the interface here if you wish as well.
And of course we've got the vocoder. We've got the I mean, this is probably your entry level Novation synth, isn't it? I would say.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're right. It has got the vocoder as well. It's also got something that we call vocal tune on there, which allows you to pitch and repitch and snap your voice to pitches.
Again, all DSP kind of coders getting their chops
Yep.
on. The thing about the grid and the buttons is quite interesting, because obviously over here we've got the Launchpad, and the Launchpad is, this was again a kind of breakthrough product, certainly for you guys. I mean, it's based on that kind of the grid that was, I think, originally sort of seen on things like Mono and what have you. But
Sure.
You've kind of taken it and honed it into an interface that really does allow people to work in this way. And this sort of button sort of philosophy definitely seems to be a direction that interfaces are going in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And this is a Launchpad S, which has some stuff going on under the hood that's power that deals with power and able to do more stuff with the lights as well, isn't it? So this is the latest version.
That's right. Yeah, it's also class compliant, so it'll allow you to use it with an iPad.
Ah, okay. But really, the thing that everybody's waiting for at the moment is the Base Station 2, right?
Yeah.
If we could just grab that.
Thank you.
And this is where we first met or re-met. This is your the reimagination of the original Base Station. But there's a lot of great synthesis techniques under here.
Absolutely, it's gone back to the roots of the Base Station. It's analog synthesis, albeit under digital control. Huge amount of fun, and that's coming very, very shortly, in a matter of days or weeks.
And if you want to see that, we did a very good in-depth with Nick, which is kind of the reason this video came about. So go back and watch that. It's well worth looking at. Right, so I want to say thank you very much to Nick for coming down and holding the Base Station and bringing all of these lovely instruments with it. I know some of them are actually still quite hard to track down. Yeah?
Particularly the Platinum, but thank you ever so much.
That's all right. But now I just want to have a little treat for you. This is a very special moment. This is your happy birthday moment. So this is even got, look, it's got 21.
That
so I
is
think
beautiful.
what you really need to do is blow the candles out.
There
Well
you go.
done.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Nick. Cheers.
Thank you.